Call the meeting to order. This pre-agenda meeting today. I will do a roll call vote. Mayor Pro Tem, are you here?
Here.
Councilmember Reinbark, are you here? Yes, sir. Councilmember Spears, are you here? Councilmember Spears? Councilmember Waddell? Here. Councilmember Andrews? Councilmember Joyner?
Here.
And the chair is here. Okay. C1 is the approval of the minutes. C2 is a resolution authorizing award of a contract for yard waste processing services to Diversified Biomass Company. C3 is a resolution authorizing an extension to the interlocal agreement between the City of Wilmington and New Hanover County for the processing of recyclables materials collected by the City of Wilmington. C4 is a resolution authorizing a new lease for the 7th floor of the Skyline Center. C5 is a resolution renewing the 3-year contract to Infotech Research Group for consulting and training in the amount of $106,869. C6 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a 3-year agreement with SHI International Corporation for cloud storage for GIS data in an amount not to exceed $328,000. C7 is a resolution amending the military leave policy for the City of Wilmington. C8 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to amend the agreement with the Thalian Association of Wilmington to manage the Hannah Block Historic USO/Community Arts Center. Mr. Reinbark.
Could I get someone to, not to, at this meeting, but someone to give me an idea of what monies have been expended on Pine Grove North to date? Thank you.
C9.
Have that answer now, that'd be fine, but I don't need it right this second. Thank you.
C9 is a resolution rejecting bid for the Pine Grove Drive at Oleana Drive and McMillan Avenue intersection improvements project. C10 is a resolution to utilize $25,000 from the City Council's contingency fund for project installation commemoration, the American Revolution and Americans' role in the war. Public hearings. PH1 is an ordinance amending the official zoning maps of the city to initially zone property containing 8.265 acres of land located at 904, 912, and 1000 North Kerr Avenue, and rezone property containing 2.965 acres of land at 818, 902, 910, and 914 North Kerr Avenue to MD10 CD medium density multi-dwelling residential district conditional district for a 79-unit multi-dwelling development.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to interrupt and let you know that I was here.
I got you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
PH2 is an ordinance amending the official zoning map of the City of Wilmington, rezone property containing 5.44 acres located at 202, 310, and 314 Covell Avenue from R15 moderate density single dwelling district to MD17 CD high density multi-dwelling residential conditional district for a 65-unit townhome development. And then PH3 is an ordinance amending the Land Development Code, Chapter 18, to eliminate special use permits and replace with conditional zoning. And then PH4 is an ordinance directing the housing inspector to vacate, close, and repair the dwelling at 565 Manley Avenue is unfit for human habitation pursuant to Article 5, Chapter 16 of the City Code, and directing that a notice be placed thereon prohibiting its use or occupancy. And again, PH5 is an ordinance directing the housing inspector to vacate, close, and repair or demolish a dwelling at 565 B Manley Avenue is unfit for human habitation pursuant to Article 5, Chapter 16 of the City Code, and directing that a notice be placed thereon prohibiting its use or occupancy. And then we have several ordinances. 01 is making appropriation to the general fund for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2025. This is a first reading only. 02 is an ordinance making appropriation to the special grants, projects, financial plans, enterprise funds, debit service funds, special tax district, and convention center fund for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2025. 03 is an ordinance making appropriations to the capital projects fund for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2025. 04 is an ordinance of amending various chapters of the City of Wilmington's fee schedule for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2025. 05 is an ordinance making supplemental appropriations in the amount of $1,800,000 to the Convention Center Operating Fund from excess event revenues to cover directly related events expenses. 06A is an ordinance making supplemental appropriations in the amount of $431,200 from the North Carolina Department of Transportation for the Downtown Trail Phase 1 Design Project. And then 06B is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with the North Carolina Department of Transportation for the Downtown Trail Phase 1 Design Project. 07A is an ordinance making supplemental appropriations in the amount of $314,800 from the NNP Cape Fear River LLC and the Proximity Watermark LLC to the Streets and Sidewalks Projects Fund for the installation of a roundabout and associated roadway improvements at the intersection of Independence Boulevard and River Road. And then 07B is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement to an amendment number 1 to the roadway improvement agreement with NNP Cape Fear LLC and the Proximity Watermark LLC for the installation of a roundabout and associated roadway improvements at the intersection of Independence Boulevard and River Road, and pedestrian improvements on Independence Boulevard.
Mr. Mayor, I
Yes,
have
sir.
a question, just clarification on 05, the 1.8 Convention Center operating expenses or operating fund.
Yeah.
I guess we had excess revenues that are then needing to go to cover the related expenses. Would those excess revenues not typically go into their fund balance and then just be appropriated to that expense from there? Bless you.
So essentially, the 1.8 million, what happened is we have the budget, and the additional revenues were brought in either from additional events or potentially events that had increased food, beverage revenue coming in. And so in connection with those increased revenues, we also had increased expenses. So for budget purposes, in order to clean up the budget, we need to increase our appropriation for the expense side. So we will have additional revenue that is above and beyond the expenses that were incurred that will be flowing into their fund balance. It's really just to make sure that we're okay with our budget appropriation and don't have any statute violations.
Okay, yeah, so it's really just a clerical maneuver more than
Yeah.
anything. All right, thank you.
R1 is a resolution adopting a Parks and Recreation Programs and Services User Cost Recovery Policy. And then R2 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a crossing closure and traffic separation study implementation agreement between the North Carolina Department of Transportation, CSX Incorporated, and the City of Wilmington. And then the last one is R3, which is a resolution authorizing the use of the design, build, delivery method for the renovation of the 5th floor and 115 North 3rd Street. And this concludes this part of the agenda. Mr. Reinbach, again.
Yes, sir. If possible, I'd like to go back to, I can't remember exactly what, it was regarding the special use permit. If I could, if we could kind of flesh that out just a little bit, because that's, there's been some good points made for both sides, and I'd just like to have maybe our city staff come up and address some of the people who are opposed to doing away with the special use permit process, some of their concerns, and how they do present some good points, and I'd just like to hear it from you.
Yes, sir.
That's pretty much my question. I mean, in the Planning Commission meetings or minutes, it discusses stripping away some rights of developers to come down, and can we address some of those concerns with our permitted uses in those districts, or how are we going to address their concerns?
I believe the main concern I heard was the special use permit is more straightforward on their part, because they basically would just provide evidence to support the approval of that. It restricts a broader audience. It kind of focuses it on people that are adjacent to the site, as opposed to allowing the entire community to weigh in. Those are the concerns that I heard. I think for staff's perspective, we planners are kind of biased towards community engagement, so we don't.
Say that again.
Planners are generally biased towards community engagement, so we have a larger audience. That's something we want to see, but again, that's just our perspective.
Well, with regard to, I've seen a number over the years, not just here, but over across the street at the county, where someone would make a run at the city with a conditional use permit, and it wouldn't, for whatever reason, fly, and then they back up and come back with a special use permit. Is that something that, is that where the process is being abused a little bit? Or is that just, I mean, certainly they're able to do that. How do you feel about that?
There's definitely a different process. For a special use permit, you don't have a staff recommendation, you don't have a planning commission recommendation, and they're basically just supporting, they're providing evidence to support those 4 findings. So it's a more straightforward approach on the developer side to come forward with one of those.
Well, you know, until fairly recently, I believe it was when John Joy was here, maybe, the planning commission did have standing and made a recommation. I mean, am I wrong on that?
We used to make a recommendation, but since you're supposed to be making that decision at the meeting based on evidence, we stopped doing
Well,
that.
I never understood why we did that, since we were the sole
Right. Yes, sir.
party. Is there any, was there ever any talk or discussion about when someone should apply for a special use permit, being able to enable or go out and identify the folks that are going to eventually have standing on the night of the hearing, and have them prepared or provide them with, because, I mean, I've seen too many of them where the people who come up that have standing, they don't fully understand it, and it's understandable why they don't understand it. And a lady would stand up here and say, well, we just don't think, and then the lawyer for the applicant, you know, objects, and he's right. Those are the issues that cause me to want to do away with the special use permit, is I see these people coming up and they're cut off at the knees before they ever get started. And that's just the nature of the type of hearing that it is. Do you see any way that the special use permit could be salvaged and yet give those folks with standing that have an issue with it? And when I say standing, that's I always had a little issue with that. You've really got to be attached to it, adjacent to it, or what have you, and it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't allow for the greater community to have any standing of their own. There's a question in there somewhere, Brian.
Yeah, I think it gets back to the hearing. I mean, I'll reference the hearing we had a few months back. You basically had 2 hearings, one hearing for standing and one hearing to hear evidence.
Yeah.
The only thing I can think of is somehow separating those out and doing a standing hearing, and then, you know what I mean? You still have to go through that process to establish standing. And the only people that can approve standing are you folks. So
I know from experience up here, and there's others up here that share the same experience. There was a time when the special use permits were not that unusual, and they just didn't seem to run like they have in a few years recently. But when the CUP, the conditional use permit, came to be, I feel comfortable that the CUP process works. And it gives, you know, the audience can be filled with red shirts, green shirts, yellow shirts, what have you. They speak their piece. Council does have the ability to inject some opinion even after they've gone through the planning commission or the staff recommendation or not recommendation. And that we don't always rubber stamp it, and sometimes we do. But I think that the conditional use permit has worked. You agree with that?
I believe it's a much more straightforward process, and it allows for a lot more interaction with the elected officials and the community, for sure.
Okay. Thank you, Brian.
Yes, sir.
Brian, hold on for a second. How many special use permits have we? I can remember the one at the Healing Place that was a long one here that the county asked for, and I remember the one at Holly Tree as of late. But I can't think of any others that we use that often, because I know on special use, we're talking about, sometimes Mr. Reinbach talks about spot zoning, and one of the things about the special use is for schools and recovery centers that maybe are not allowed in those particular districts, we have a special use permit primarily so that we can flesh out the particulars and specifics about this particular issue that comes before the city council, number one. I don't have any problem with anybody speaking about anything in regards to giving somebody standing, because at the end of the day, the specifics of what the engineers say, what the stormwater people say, and if somebody comes up and says this is going to flood, fine. Let it be flushed out in court if they're wrong. I don't have a problem with that. But I'm going to ask you, Meredith, why do we have to have standing? Is it because the statute says so?
Yes, sir, and it's very specific about who has standing. You either have to be an adjoining property owner, or if you're not, you have to have some sort of special damages that are different from the rest of the community. And that's the part that most people can't meet. So if you allow somebody with standing to testify, and then it gets appealed up to Superior Court, the court's probably going to say that person didn't have standing and kick it back down to you to have another hearing.
Okay, so in respect to the healing place, for example, and I'm going to use that, or a school, or special schools, we've seen those before in the past. If they don't meet the zoning requirements, there's no way for them to even go there in any way, shape, or form.
Correct, unless they've got some
Okay.
form of special damages.
And I think that you could really narrow the scope of how this thing is used, so people have a fear that it's going to be abused. But on specific issues like schools or recovery centers or hospitals or something of that nature that are specific in nature that don't fit the zoning requirements, we're not going to be able to bring it forward, period.
You will through a conditional use. You could through a conditional use process, not through a special.
So how's this, but the staff is going to have to make a recommendation against it because it's not within the zoning classifications. You follow what I'm saying? If it's not in the zoning classification, the planning department is not going to make a recommendation for, even on a conditional district. They could come forward. Follow me?
I'll let.
If it doesn't meet the code requirements, we can't recommend it.
That's
We're
right.
just-
You guys can't even make a recommendation on a
Right.
special use. That's why it's a special use permit. I just think this thing needs to really be thought out much more thoroughly than what we're talking about right now.
But I think that you could, I think that with a conditional use permit, council could allow that. Like if a school is not allowed.
We can allow anything, but what I'm saying is under the zoning classification and under the conditional use permit, they're going to have to make a recommendation against. Follow me?
Let me
I mean,
jump.
they-
Wait a minute, let me just finish
they-
my question
You're
first.
correct.
Correct?
If somebody comes forward with a use that has prescribed conditions and they do not meet those prescribed conditions, whether it be additional screening, buffers, whatever, if they don't meet a code requirement, we can't approve it. We couldn't approve anything if it doesn't meet a code.
So that's why the special use permit is put in place. We couldn't have done the healing place, is what I'm saying to you
The
guys.
special use permit also has prescribed conditions associated with it. It just has a different approval process through this evidentiary hearing process. And
But-
council can add conditions or subtract. You just wouldn't get a recommendation from us.
I understand that, but you're going to have to make a recommendation on a conditional district rezoning because you have to say, does it meet the criteria of the city's zoning? A lot of people don't understand that. On a special use, you guys do not make a recommendation because it's a special use beyond the scope of what the condition allows.
We do not make a recommendation on
Correct.
special use. Yes, sir.
So, but that doesn't mean that, but you could get the same result. You get the same result either way. You could have done you still would have been able to do the healing place. You still would have been able to have the same conditions. The process to get there just would have been different. It would have been a conditional use application instead of a special use permit.
So when you're asking us to read into the record the issue, and does it comply? The agreements that we put in here, you know, before we do a zoning, on a conditional zoning, you're
Consistency
asking the
statements.
consistency statement. And we're approving something that's not consistent with what the zoning regulation is saying. You're saying that's going to be okay? It's not going to be contested in a court of law?
No, sir, I think that you could do that under those, because you're setting those conditions, just like you do with the special use permit. So you're setting the new conditions. I mean, we do it all the time with conditional use permits.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, I'm telling you.
In the permitted uses chart, you've got all your zoning districts, and then the column goes down according to the uses. You find your use, you go across to your zoning district, and it either says P or it's blank. And in the old days, and I don't know about now, it used to would say SP, special use permit, or SUP. If somebody would come into the planning office and have a proposal for something that's not allowed, I mean, that's where it stops.
Yeah, we would
You
not
can't
be
do
able to
anything.
process
You don't go through, spend staff hours doing it. That's where it stops. It's not allowed in that district.
it. Correct.
So there was a case though where an SUP could kind of not skirt the issue, but you would consider it, even though it was not a P, it was an SUP.
Correct.
Correct, okay? With an SUP, you prove the 4 findings of fact. With a CUP, you don't.
That is correct, but they, just to be clear, they both have to meet all the code requirements.
I get it, but with the 4 findings of fact, these applicants come up here and they've got more experts than you can shake a stick at, and the folks out there that are affected, the people who have standing, they're not blindsided. To me, it's very unfair in the way we apply that, because if they meet the 4 findings of fact, and they have experts up here that go on ad infinitum telling us how it meets those 4 findings of fact, our hands are tied. And then if we vote against it or whatever, they just march across the street, get a judge over there that says you met the 4 findings of fact and kicks it back over here to us. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And just for clarification, all those places that are now marked with SUP, that you can get by an SUP will be switched to a conditional use permit. So they're not going away. So there's nothing that you could have done before this that you will not be able to do now. They're going to be just switched to the conditional use permit.
But I agree with that, and I know that. I mean, I understand that. But it certainly seems more, is fairer, correct usage, it seems fairer to the people at large out there. And I think, I don't think anybody can point at this council or the one before it or the one 5 years ago that we are down on redevelopment and what have you using the conditional use permit, that they can't. So I don't see where all the heartburn is coming from. I read their comments, and boy, I hear it. In the business I'm in, I hear that. But I don't think that we're going to hamstring the development community in any way, shape, or form, going from an SUP process to the conditional use. It's my opinion.
I don't have a problem in eliminating anything that has anything to do with residential development in case anybody has a concern. What I have a concern about is when you have a specific use, like the healing place, and you have people that are coming down here saying, we don't want the healing place because we're afraid they're going to break into our, in the case of hospice, they're going to break into hospice and steal the drugs there. I don't know if you heard that, but that was a big one there. So Brian and his group, because it doesn't meet the criteria, would have to come before the city council on a conditional district rezoning if it did not meet that criteria and say, we can't approve it. That's why the special use permit is put in place. And you're going to have to make a recommendation. You're going to be sitting out here with a bunch of people saying, you guys recommended against it, you guys are going forward.
Right. We would
Just
make a
want everybody to
recommendation.
know that.
We would make a recommendation on conditional use, but again, the special use permit, they would still have to meet all the code
I
requirements.
understand that. But I'm just saying is the special use is beyond the uses that are allowed there. It may have a specific use of a school or a hospital or a recovery center that nobody wants in their backyard. That's all I'm saying.
Yes, sir.
And you're going to have to make a specific recommendation to this council.
Yes, sir.
And I know it's going to be. And then everybody out there is going to say, why are you going against your staff? That's all.
Well, we do that all the time.
No, we don't.
I hear what both Councilman Rodenbach and the mayor are saying here. Is there a way to narrow the focus of the SUP to make sure that it's only utilized for special uses rather than, I think, just kind of large blanket rezonings? Is there a way to enumerate what we view are special uses within the SUP process? Schools and treatment centers, I think, are what the mayor's advocating.
Right now, there are 19 uses that require a special use permit in some districts. Some districts are allowed with prescribed conditions, some districts are allowed by a special use permit. But the council could decide to reduce that list based on the uses, how they're prescribed and what districts they're allowed in.
Before tomorrow night, could I just get a list of those 19 uses so I can peruse it?
Yes, sir.
Maybe in here, but.
I believe it's in there, but we'll send it back out.
I
don't have a
the
slide
packet
tomorrow
yet,
night that
so
kind of illustrates all
All right,
that.
thanks, Brian.
Yes, sir.
May I? I think that's a great suggestion. If the special use process is that narrow, where it's down to 19 or less, I ain't got a problem with that. If it's something that we really need, much like the healing place. I mean, I think a lot of the fears have been proven to be, you know, maybe a little more than what actually has occurred out there. But where I have the problem is those folks that come up here that have standing, and maybe they understand that, maybe they don't, maybe some of the other neighbors don't understand that. Where I have a problem is them coming up here and being completely out of their league. They're not represented by any council, they don't have their own appraiser, and if there's going to be, if this is going to continue, then we need to have some mechanism. Those folks that get notified whenever there's a conditional use permit or what is it, within 300 feet or adjacent to the property, those folks that get notified need to be put on notice, or there needs to be something in that notice that they need to get together and hire their own experts and give them a full understanding of what they can expect when they come down here on the night of the hearing. That's where I have a problem. It just seems totally unfair. It's the process, and it's legal, and we do it, and I understand that, but at the same time, I feel that those folks are not getting a fair shake.
Agree. I just say narrow it real down to a couple. Because I don't want to have another situation where we had with the Healing Place, where we needed this place, and we went through 2 nights of a significant public hearing, and if we hadn't had that SUP, that thing would never have passed. That's all I'm saying is, you can narrow it down, eliminate the residential, everybody's concerned about that, but you really need to narrow it down on some of these things, or else you're going to be coming before us denying a lot of these things that probably should be put in place, and then you're going to make us make that kind of tough call. That's all I'm saying.
Well, the thing that really bugged me about the Healing Place, it's not like we were putting it in the middle of Pine Valley or Forest Hills. We were putting it in the medical community where it belongs. So I kind of look at maybe our ordinance was a little bit, you know, behind the times. We should have had that ordinance ready for it so we wouldn't have to do an SUP. That's where it needs to be. I mean, it's the perfect place for it. I can't think of another place in the city limits of Wilmington that's more appropriate for that use than where it sits today.
And allowing a use by prescribed condition instead of SUP is also an option, so
Yeah.
something to consider.
Okay. Okay, guys, thank you.
Thank you.
Tom?
Mayor Pro Tem, members of council, we have 3 presentations this morning for you. And then you also have a nominating committee meeting and audit committee. The first presentation is by Dave Mays, Public Works Director, Keenan Fountain update. If you recall, a couple months ago, you had an update on that project, and we want to let you know where we are and give you some suggestions on the path forward.
Morning.
Morning.
So just to review real quickly, Keenan Fountain and the intersection of 5th and Market. Market is an NCDOT street. Fountain's been there since 1921, 1953. The State Highway Commission requested removal. Instead, City Council at the time elected to reduce the footprint to what it is today. And this is a historic carved limestone structure. Just to review what we've talked about before, in September of last year, we presented you with some historical information about accidents, maintenance challenges, previous work done, and also the historic oversight over the fountain. In March of this year, we updated you on the current plans for repair and restoration with some cost estimates as well as a schedule. Today, we're going to talk about the actual results for the bid that we received, talk about the insurance claims, as well as provide you with some recommendations. So in terms of the bid results, the bid was separated into a couple of different sections. One was the repairs, and these are the repairs that are necessary to make the fountain operational again. They relate directly to the damage that was done by the contractor working for NCDOT when it was broken about 1.5 years ago. So the bid for that work is $285,500, and that reflects on the kind of the left-hand side of your screen. It's all in the northeastern quadrant of the fountain. The engineer's estimate was about $65,000 less than that. In addition to that, we had restoration work that was designed and included in the bid and that is reflective of what's on the right-hand side of the screen. The bid for that work is $103,500. The engineer's estimate was, as you can see, is quite a bit more than that. In addition to that, we proposed replacement of the plumbing underneath that to make it a little bit more safe for our staff to access underneath it, as well as to maintain it. It included a manifold, some isolation valves, diminished need for confined space entry. The bid and the estimate were pretty close, about $3,000, $3,000 to $4,000 separating those two amounts. We also have a quote for repairing the bench that was most recently hit by a vehicle. The quote is $48,630, and the claim for that is pending at this time. We also have quotes to repair the two sets of balusters on the east and west side. You can see the amounts right there. There are no available claims related to the damage done for those two features. In summary, when I presented this same table to you back in March. The difference, the number down here in the bottom right-hand corner of $142,250, that's simply reflecting that the numbers that I presented to you back in March are higher by $142,000. So this is the bid result is a pretty good result. In terms of the insurance claim for the fountain, we actually have today at 10 a.m. an inspection scheduled with the city's insurance carrier on site with our contractor at 10 a.m. to go over the bid result. The intent of this inspection and our intent really is to make sure that our insurance carrier makes the city whole in the amount of the bid amount, which was $285,000. Right now, we have received about $98,000 for that claim, so the intent is to try and make up the difference between the two. The claim for the bench has been filed, and it's under review by the insurance carrier for the driver of that vehicle. In terms of options, option one is always do nothing, which we're not going to be recommending that. Number two is to repair the damage to the fountain, and again, this is repairing the damage that was done by the DOT contractor and restore the operational status of the fountain. Number three is about restoration work, and that is the other three quadrants of the fountain. Number four is about replacing the plumbing underneath. Number five references the balusters. Number six references the benches, whether or not to repair or remove those for future relocation. And then lastly, for the fountain, explore implications for possible future relocation. Based on our recommendations, we're recommending you go ahead and proceed with getting the fountain repaired and restoring its operational status. That's at a cost of $285,500. That will require us to bring to you an appropriation, and I'll go over that in just a minute. For the balusters, we're recommending that those be removed for possible future relocation. We can manage that work with in-house staff, so there's no out-of-pocket cost, but it will require HPC approval. And for the benches, same thing, removed for possible future relocation. Again, this is an in-house cost. We can do that with our staff and resources. So there's no out-of-pocket cost, but again, that also requires HPC approval as a requirement. The fountain, we'd recommend that we explore implications for possible future relocation. That will require approval for the actual relocation if we decide to proceed with that. And staff would be prepared to submit a CIP request for the period, the next CIP plan, which is between 29 and 34. In terms of the appropriation to move forward with getting the fountain repaired, we would need to bring an appropriation ordinance to you at your July 15th meeting. We would appropriate the amount we've already received from the DOT claim, the amount from the bench damage, and we would request about a $30,000 amount for contingency to proceed. Be happy to answer any other questions.
That's a nice picture to send us. Dave, I just wanted, I know this fountain has been repaired, or I know that there was a significant amount of money that was donated from the Keenan family at one time in their foundation to repair the fountain, and it seems like it gets operational, and then a couple of, maybe a year later, 6 months later, whatever, it seems to fail or stops. And when I drive by, I say, well, why is the fountain not working? And then somebody says, well, somebody threw something in the fountain and clogged this up or did this, or there was a wreck there. So let's go back to the stuff about people throwing stuff into the fountain, because the famous thing around here has been for years is to throw Tide detergent or something and bubbles, and that obviously has a significant impact on the operations of the fountain, correct? Or does it? I don't know.
It's
Cleans it out?
certainly
What does
not
it do?
helpful.
Yeah.
It creates work for staff. It doesn't necessarily deter from its operational status.
So you can throw bubbles in there and it's okay?
No, I'm not referencing that at all.
Just want to make certain, that's all I wanted to hear, because I've heard that story.
I'm not
I don't know
providing you any
if it's
information
folklore
about
or
that.
whatever, because I'll have a bunch of people down there throwing them in there.
Right, we
I
have to go,
enjoyed-
I know you do.
I
Go ahead.
enjoyed the time they put bubbles in the fountain.
Go ahead.
we have to go kind of manage that incident, which, we'll shut it down and try and get the soap out of it.
Yeah.
The soap doesn't do the fountain and the stone any good. So from that perspective, it's not good for the fountain. But operationally, it's a fairly short period of time that it would impact the
But
operation.
it's primarily wrecks, people that run into it, literally physically bump into it. Okay, very good. Anybody?
I'm in favor of this recommendation. I think what it does a couple different things. It gets the, a historical fountain that's a landmark in the city of Wilmington back up and running, and which has been needed for some time. And I appreciate the work that has to go into the insurance claim, and that the majority of that will be paid for. But it also, it doesn't just get rid of the other historical aspects of that gift, namely the balusters and the bench. I think we had some good discussion about this up here, what to do with it eventually. I think we can integrate it into, some future park space that we may have downtown in the not too distant future. Hold them off site, get them repaired when the time is right, and then, repurpose them there. It's really a fitting tribute to a historical landmark. So I think it's a good proposal, and look forward to seeing it happen.
Thank you.
When I've looked at the bid results, and one where they said the engineer's bid was $310,000 on their estimate, and then the bid that received was $103,000. Why such a big discrepancy? Are we getting everything we're asking that the engineers asked for? What's happening?
I asked that exact same question, and from my discussion with our engineer, he's confident in the contractor that submitted that. Specifically, why is it so different? I'm not sure I have a very specific answer for you, other than to say that I've gone back to our engineer, and our engineer has gone back to the contractor that submitted that bid, and we're confident that he's prepared to do the work that was described there. Now, keep in mind that if we proceed with this recommendation, the $103,000 part of the work is not going to be part of that, because that's the restoration. All we're going to do is the top part there, the $285,000 bid, and that's simply to get it operational again and repaired from the DOT damage. So the only part of what's on the slide in front of you is the top part. The northeastern quadrant of the fountain is going to get fixed, and we're going to turn that thing back on.
Okay, and so the bottom half, restoration on the right, we're not going to do that. Is that what you're saying?
We're not recommending that at this time. It can be, we have the design. It can be presented to council in the in the future, and it would add to the amount of the appropriation if council wanted to proceed with that, but we're not recommending it at this time.
Charles?
You know, that old saying, when you keep doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results, is insanity, and that kind of applies here somewhat, because in 1953, they should have told DOT to go pound sand and cut down that to one lane on each side. With the redevelopment of Fifth Avenue, will the Fifth Avenue be confined to one lane, or will that still be two?
At that intersection, Fifth Avenue, based on the rehabilitation work that's going on right now, it will be one lane in each direction.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Well, and, excuse me, at that intersection, the outside lanes going north and south will be turn lanes only. So the through lane will be the inside lane.
Okay. Well, anybody can ride by there, particularly on the Market Street. You can see where the black rubber, the tires have rubbed up against it. And until that, there's, the traffic pattern used to be Market Street was the main feeder coming into downtown Wilmington. It's not so much anymore. It's still, quite heavily traveled. But until a block before in each direction is cut down to one lane, you'll be back up here, or your next person that has your job will be back up here on a regular basis. Because, people try to make that light and they go around that thing. It's easy to happen, a wreck there. It's easy to happen.
Certainly.
That wreck in your picture, that was a Fifth Avenue directional. So, thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next presentation is a presentation on murals in the Parks and Recreation Department. Andrea Beatty, Parks and Recreation Director, and Andrea Talley, Cultural Program Specialist, will provide you with that information.
Good morning, Mayor Pro Tem, and City Council. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you this morning. Historically, staff has received a request for a mural installation maybe once every 3 years. However, now we're trending to where we receive several requests in a single year. And so because of that, we wanted to let you know how we're processing those requests. And we want to overview 2 pending projects. One is a proposal. The other is actually a city staff-led initiative. And then Andrea will also show you some of the recently completed projects. And so now I'll turn it over to Andrea. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
As Amy said, we're here to talk about 2 proposals for some new murals that will be completed hopefully this year. First of all, I want to review some of our recent murals that have been installed. First, the Forest of Dreams at the Dream Center for Education. And then there's actually 3 at the Earl Jackson Pool. These were all led by Dr. Jana Robertson, but were a collaboration with the Dream Center for Education and a community effort. The most recent one is the mural at the Sheridell Morgan Fitness Center. This was led by the Veterans Creative Arts Program. And then we installed one at each of our community centers, at the MLK Center and the Derek Davis Center. And these were also community murals that were led by Dr. Jana Robertson. And I want to thank you all for your support of these murals up to this point, and I want to thank the artists who were involved. As Amy said, the Parks and Recreation Department, these murals help address some of the goals in the Open Space Comprehensive Plan. Those goals are to improve the physical condition of parks to feel safer and more welcoming. Goal number 5.4 is consider a 1% public art dedication. And in the absence of actually implementing that, these murals are addressing the need for public art in our public spaces. And goal number 12, to develop programs to activate spaces, encourage users to experience parks and recreation facilities. And these mural collaborations help achieve these goals at little to no cost to the city. The Parks and Recreation Department has recently implemented a written administrative procedure to let everybody know when murals are coming up and when they've been completed. The procedure involving the relevant stakeholders in the design process, notifying the Arts Council about the project, presenting the projects to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. A notification memo is sent to city managers and to city council, and a submission is sent for the city council weekly update. And shown on this slide is a bigger photo of the Forest of Dreams. If you haven't seen it, I strongly encourage you all to visit. It's at 10th and Fanning, and is a true community effort and is just beautiful. So that takes us to the partnership that we have pursued with the Dreams Center for Arts Education. These photos show some of the graffiti. Some of it I've drawn over because it's inappropriate. But this shows the graffiti at the Greenfield Skate Park that has been done by members of the public. Due to this unwanted graffiti, city staff approached the Dreams Center for Arts Education and invited them to create murals to be installed at the Greenfield Grind Skate Park. Dreams Center for Arts Education, and I want to thank Dr. Kimberly Leby, the director at Dreams, and Jaya Kandasamy for being here this morning. Dreams Center for Arts Education invited artists Mark Weber and Bree Malott to work with the Dreams Teen Council to create the murals and to install them. And the Dreams will also be, the Dreams Teens will also be hosting a cleanup day around the skate park thanks to an internal grant from the Dreams Center for Arts Education. The time frame, because we're approaching the heat of summer, will be in the fall of 2025. Materials will be outdoor paint and paste-up material. And the maintenance will be, when touch-ups are needed, the city can request help from Dreams, but they should last 8 to 10 years on their own. I'm good, thank you. These are some of the mock-ups that were created by the artists. They reflect the natural wildlife there at the park, with an additional nod to Topsy the elephant, I believe, who waded in Greenfield Park about a little bit more than 100 years ago. And moving on to the next mural, City was approached by an artist named Kaylin Devone, who grew up here in Wilmington but now lives in Charlotte. She has witnessed, well, she was a part of this mural that was done on a basketball court in Charlotte, but she let us know that in Charlotte, there's a big movement of painting, especially outdoor basketball courts with murals. And she was hoping to bring that to Wilmington. So she proposed a self-funded donation. She would be funding and doing all of the artist work for the mural. The materials would be paint and sealant, outdoor paint and sealant. And she firmly is invested in community involvement. She wants the community to be involved in planning, designing, and painting the outdoor basketball court. The time frame, again, is probably going to be in the fall of 2025. The maintenance, again, this should last around 8 years. And if any touch-ups are needed, we can engage the artist again for those touch-ups. For the location, staff has zeroed in on the Maids Park basketball court due to its good condition and its location in a neighborhood. This basketball court, there's actually 2 courts there. And likely, as is shown on this slide, she would be painting just one court and then probably repainting the lines on the other court. These are some of the mock-ups that she's done for this project. But again, she will seek community input, and we'll make sure to engage especially people who play basketball at Maids Park in selecting the final design. Any questions?
Any questions? So they're going to put this on asphalt.
Yes. All right, thank you.
Great, thank you. Next.
Last item is we received a request from Councilmember Andrews for a presentation to be shared with council. It was the Urban Forestry Master Plan presentation that was provided to the Tree Commission. And then additionally, also, she asked that we provide information at this time on tree species specification, how trees are selected. And so we have that information today. And that presentation will be made by Sally Thigpen, Parks and Recreation Assistant Director.
Good morning, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. I also want to welcome members of the Wilmington Tree Commission and the Alliance for Cape Fear Trees in the audience with us today. They are fierce partners with the city for the urban forest. So the purpose of this presentation is to update you on the Urban Forest Master Plan status. It was adopted by City Council in 2023 and represents an important investment in the maintenance and management of our urban forest. There are 11 recommendations coming out of this plan. I'm going to go through all of the ones that we have made progress on. They're not listed in order of priority, although I would say number 1's probably my top priority. And each recommendation is further broken down into several initiatives. All of this is available on our website. So as I said, number 1 is to complete the inventory of all public trees in Wilmington. In the initial master plan development, all of the trees, the street trees, within the 1945 corporate limits were identified and are now part of our existing inventory. This represents about 1/4 of the estimated street trees in the city. So we're estimating around 40,000 street trees citywide. As the number 1 recommendation, this is our highest priority, as it will set us up with the data that we need to manage this important asset, as well as identify all vacant tree planting sites and provide a street tree planting plan. This powerful tool helps to prioritize tree maintenance and planting and focus our resources more effectively. Number 2 is to update Wilmington's urban tree canopy assessment. So this was completed using imagery data from the USDA between 2016 and 2020. As you can see the numbers there, the 2020 data, or the 2016 data was showing us canopy cover at 48.1%, and in 2020 at 41.4%. We are in the process of working with internal staff, with IT and GIS, to update this using 2024 data that we're hoping will become available in the coming months. We've also been planting trees. Please keep in mind that young trees have small canopies, and even though we've been planting trees and making the effort since 2020, planting more than 1,200 trees internally, citywide, and this doesn't count our volunteer planting efforts with the Alliance, but small tree canopies don't show up on imagery for a few years, so that's just something to consider. So we're hoping that this can be completed over the next year as that imagery becomes available. There is also other imagery that might be available as technologies are emerging in measuring canopy cover in urban forests. Benchmarking with the national nonprofit American Forests, They're showing a recommendation of approximately 40% canopy cover citywide, so we're right in that range at 41 and a bit. The next initiative, strengthen relationships and partnerships to support implementation of the Urban Forest Master Plan. We've made some progress in working with the Alliance for Cape Fear Trees on updating a memorandum of understanding to work with them on volunteer tree planting. We are planning an appropriation of tree mitigation funds to the Alliance to supplement planting and maintenance of young trees. The city already supports the Alliance in their tree planting efforts. Our team is averaging about 100 hours per tree planting, assisting them in about 2 or 3 plantings a year. This includes reviewing planting sites, assisting with species selection, sourcing and picking up trees, delivering them, helping on actual planting day, and providing that initial mulch and water. I just want to toggle back to this slide because another recommendation of the plan is to ensure that Wilmington regulations, best management practices, and guidelines are in place to support tree canopy growth and preservation. So we are working with our friends in the planning department on providing technical support for development plan review, and we are also participating in updating the technical standards and specifications manual, which is going to help us speak more clearly to planting, tree protection, and species selection. This recommendation to dedicate city staff to support the urban forest operations and education. The urban forestry team, housed in the Parks and Recreation Department, has an experienced and qualified staff that are dedicated to serving the public and maintaining city trees. Each year, they are responding to hundreds of requests for tree pruning and removals. They're performing hazard tree evaluations. We have ISA certified staff and also tree risk assessment qualified arborists. They plant trees through both contracted and in-house efforts, as well as supporting the Alliance for Cape Fear Trees volunteer planting efforts. While the city has a robust urban forestry program, it is noted in the Urban Forest Master Plan that the current staff and resource levels really create a program that is mostly reactive. So according to the Municipal Tree Census Survey, Wilmington's per tree spending is 35% lower than all surveyed cities across the country and 66% lower than southern cities surveyed. So one of the accomplishments we've made for this recommendation is to change our position titles to city arborist and assistant city arborist to reflect other municipal forestry programs and match professionalism in the industry. This is going to help us recruit and retain key talent. Several other positions are recommended to support operations and programming, and we'll continue to make those requests through the budget process. Number 10 is to improve communication and collaboration among city departments and outside entities. We have an updated communication platform related to tree and sidewalk conflicts. So really the goal here is to preserve trees and roots when sidewalks are repaired across the city. We have a great relationship with the fire department. They help to assist with after-hours tree-related emergencies. And of course, we're very grateful to the Wilmington Tree Commission and the Alliance, who have been extremely supportive of the city efforts to follow the Urban Forest Master Plan recommendations. The 11th recommendation is to develop a strategy to manage wood waste. We've made some strides here. Staff have worked with the Attorney's Office to develop a process for wood chip giveaway. So our first event was held in May, and it was a success. We had a lot of interest from the public, more than 50 participants, and we hope to make this a regular opportunity to find ways to get rid of that mulch in a way that gives back. We'll also be milling lumber out of logs that have been saved from hazard tree removals and incorporate it as a feature in the upcoming parks maintenance facility. So now I'm going to turn it over to our city arborist, Erin Reese. We often get questions about how and why species are selected. So this is a core urban forest management principle to maintain and manage a sustainable urban forest. This helps to provide healthy trees that are maximizing all of the environmental benefits and allows us to try and maintain them and minimize safety concerns to pedestrians and vehicles. Thanks, Aaron.
Good morning. So I just wanted to run through this. We've had a lot of questions recently, every year pretty much, about why we plant certain trees, why we don't plant all natives, why we plant so many non-native trees. We get questions occasionally about invasive species, which is in our most recent code update. Invasive species has been addressed, as well as the non-native issue for mitigation purposes. Excuse me. So I just want to run through this, and we're just kind of start off with some base information to get a understanding so that we can kind of get everybody on the same page in the conversation. And so just some basic definitions so that we know exactly what we're talking about here. So a species, when we talk about a tree species, that's a taxonomic naming classification. If you start with naming any species, you start with the highest order, which in our case would be the plant kingdom. So kingdom, phylum, class, order, genus, species would be the most specific group. So it's just a group having common attributes and designated by a common name. I'll get into the weeds in these in a little bit. Just want to get the broad definitions right now. So coming from, be even more specific, from a species, you go into a variety. When we talk about a variety, we talk about it's a naturally occurring variation within a species. So this is a variation, so it may be, you can take redbud, for example. Redbud, there's a variety of redbud that has white flowers, which is naturally occurring. It will self-perpetuate from seed. There's no human involvement required. Then we break down even further into a cultivar, which is a combination of words. So it's a cultivated variety. So it's a cultivar. It's just an industry term for that. A cultivar is naturally occurring, or it could be cultivated, or it is naturally occurring, but it can't self-perpetuate. It needs human involvement to perpetuate itself, either from stem cuttings, root cuttings, all those sorts of different propagation techniques that we have for growing new trees. If left to its own devices, a cultivar will not reproduce and continue its differences, continue those specific attributes that we see in a cultivar. It will not continue from seed. So it needs human interference to keep going. Native trees, for the purposes of our conversation here, is just any tree that is naturally occurring within our geographic region. For our discussion here, we're just talking about southeastern North Carolina. And conversely, non-native would be anything naturally occurring outside of this geographic location. So it could be other parts of North Carolina. It could be anywhere in North America or anywhere in the world. Could be considered non-native. And then invasive is just a tree that is not native to anywhere in this area, and whose presence in this area could cause harm to the economy, the environment, or human health, any of those. So non-native and invasive sometimes get misused, kind of crossed up a little bit. Non-native does not mean invasive, and occasionally invasive does not mean non-native. So just want to clarify those, and then we'll break this down a little bit further. So just a few examples of native trees, and most of these we do use as street trees and park trees. Live oak, laurel oak, everybody's familiar with. Yellow poplar is a common one here. Not everyone is overly familiar with that one. Red maple, longleaf pine, dogwood, black gum. So the live oak, the yellow poplar, and the black gum are those three pictures there. So the picture on the left is actually the airly oak, being a southern live oak. Yellow poplar there in the middle, and black gum, which is actually one of the tupelo species, there on the right. And then the last three trees that we have listed here, redbud, elm, and hornbeam, I want you to keep those in mind because those will come back up again a couple of times, those specific species, with good reason. So move into our non-natives. We have just a few more common ones that we use: crepe myrtle, zelkova, Chinese pistache, flowering cherries, ginkgos, which you have crepe myrtle, pistache, and ginkgo there across the bottom. And then again, in non-native, we have redbud, elm, and hornbeam. Moving into the most common invasive species that we have here, Bradford pear is one that everybody knows kind of off the top of their head. Tree of heaven, China berry, mimosa, Chinese tallow tree, which is also called popcorn tree. So the pear, the tree of heaven, and the Chinese tallow there across the bottom. That middle picture of tree of heaven is actually a pretty common sight in the downtown area. Tree of heaven is a very tenacious tree and will grow just about anywhere. So you just going into some examples and a little bit further explanation here. We'll use eastern redbud species just as an example. So just as the species in general, eastern redbud, the Latin or scientific name being Cercis canadensis. These two pictures here, the picture on the left is an eastern redbud in full leaf, summertime. It is a small maturing tree, generally up to about 20, 25 feet. Picture on the right side would be it in full bloom in the springtime before the leaves come on. So from species, we can break down into variety. This is what I mentioned before, variety of eastern redbud. There is a white flowering eastern redbud, which seems a little counterintuitive, but being a variety, this is a naturally occurring variation within the species. So the white flowering variety here would be Cercis canadensis variety alba, alba designating white flower. And from there, we can even go into a cultivar of eastern redbud. So the bottom right-hand picture there is a forest pansy cultivar of eastern redbud. It's a very deep red, almost purple flower or leaf, but it does also have a purple flower, just the same as the straight species. So the forest pansy, Cercis canadensis, and then, in quotes there, forest pansy would be your cultivar. You can also get into varieties who you can break down from species into a variety and then cultivars within varieties too. So naming of trees can get rather complicated. But there are reasons that we use some straight species. There are some reasons we use varieties and cultivars as well because of different attributes that make them better suited for certain areas. So I just talk a little bit about why species selection matters. It seems, commonplace to say trees adapt to where they grow naturally. Where trees are naturally growing, that's where they're best suited for. So that could be anywhere on the continent, anywhere in a certain hemisphere, break it down into a certain region. You can even go so far as to microclimates in certain cases, like the Venus flytrap. Venus flytrap's only naturally found growing natively within 100, 150 miles of Wilmington. So that is a very small area compared to other species. But in urban areas, there is absolutely nothing natural about an urban environment. It's a built environment, it's concrete, it's asphalt, it's modified soils. Everything that we build is not natural. So being able to plant native trees into an environment that is not natural for them can be very difficult. Some can handle it, some just don't. So live oak, laurel oak, American elm, all three of those species do very well in a built environment that is just not natural to them. They're very tough trees. They can handle it. Unfortunately, the laurel oak, it has a short lifespan for a large tree in a native wooded setting, but when we put it in an urban setting, it further decreases that lifespan. So laurel oak is the ones that we have the most common problems with. All of the large trees that we've had to take down out of the Market Street corridor, they're all laurel oaks. So we are doing our best not to plant laurel oak anymore. It was very common because it was a native, very easy to get, very fast growing. They were planted extensively over the last several decades. But we're doing our best not to do that, trying to avoid those problems in the future. So just continuing, non-native trees are quite often better suited for urban conditions, just based on their growing environment where they are native to. Crepe myrtles, Chinese pistache, and Chinese elm, they do very well. They're very tolerant of urban conditions. None of those are native to here. All three of those species are actually Asian natives. Most of the vast majority of plants that we use in landscaping period are not natives. Huge number of those are native to Asia and Europe, other continents. So it does make a difference. That not to say that those trees are growing naturally around concrete and asphalt where they are native, just conditions that they are able to tolerate changes, and they are better suited sometimes. Not always, but sometimes they are better suited for where we're trying to plant them here. What I was alluding to earlier, varieties and cultivars. Some varieties, some cultivars perform better in urban areas than the street species. So again here, looking at Eastern Redbud. Eastern Redbud is typically an understory tree, which means it does better in shade of larger trees. When you put one in full sun, sometimes they can handle full sun, sometimes, or quite often, they cannot handle that much heat. What I was saying is, well, earlier, Cercis canadensis variety Texensis cultivar Oklahoma redbud. So it is an Eastern redbud. It's a variety that was naturally found in Texas and Oklahoma, which is where the cultivar and the variety name come from. But because of where these are naturally occurring, they are better tolerant of heat and sun. So a lot of times these will do better as street trees. If we need a redbud that we need to plant as a street tree, we can use this if it's in full sun. And they tolerate the dry conditions that we have here quite a bit better than the regular species. Sometimes we can use the species as a street tree if it's shaded, if it's got good afternoon shade, protecting it from the afternoon sun. Sometimes the street species will do fine, and we can use that. The Princeton cultivar of American elm. If anybody's familiar with Dutch elm disease, all but eradicated American elm trees across the United States over the last several decades. They have since done a lot of research into American elms and breeding and finding naturally occurring cultivars there and some varieties that are resistant to Dutch elm disease. They're not Dutch elm proof, but they're resistant, and we can use those now, which makes a big difference. But American elm is also a native tree. There are actually some very nice specimens here around town. And with our current planting contract, there's been a lot of question, like I said, about natives and non-natives. On the current contract, all inclusive of the different species, different varieties, different cultivars within those species, our current planting contract, which includes 464 trees, had 47 different variety species and cultivars. A little bit over half of those were actually natives. So where we can use natives, we're doing our best to do so. So back to the redbud, elm, and hornbeam that I had listed on the native and non-native. This is why. So we have natives and non-natives of all three of these species, or all three of these genus. So the redbud, you have the Eastern redbud, which is the top left there. Directly below it is the non-native redbud, which is this one here is actually a Chinese redbud. It's a little bit different in the form, a little bit different in the amount of heat that they can tolerate. In the center, we have the native American elm in the top, which is a large tree. The native elm tree, American elm tree, there are several native species of elms, but the native American elm can get over 100 feet tall, very widespread. There's actually one here in town that if I'm not mistaken, has over 100 feet spread. It's in the backyard, actually down in the historic district. The non-native species of elm that we use frequently is the Chinese elm, or frequently referred to as the lace bark elm. It's a mid-sized tree, up to about 40, 45 feet tall, spread just about to match. Again, very tolerant of urban heat conditions, So we can plant those. They do very well downtown in constricted spaces where the soils are not the best, but they still thrive. The hornbeam, this was one that came up. We had some issues with this on our current contract, unfortunately. So we had a little mix-up in species. When the contractor ordered the trees, what was delivered to them was not what they ordered. And unfortunately, about half of that group was planted before we realized it. So we actually had to go back and take a few live trees out, and they will be replaced later this fall with the correct species. But the top right there is the American hornbeam. Gets up to about 25 feet tall, about 15, maybe 20 feet wide, does very well in small planting plazas. Generally will not get up high enough to interfere with power lines, so we don't really have to worry about them being topped out by the power company. And the non-native hornbeam, which is the European hornbeam, which is seen there in the bottom right, that was the one that was mistakenly planted. Unfortunately, this time we had to take a few of them out. But that one, the form on that one is completely different than the American hornbeam. So European hornbeam is generally more or less a columnar tree. Gets up to 30 feet plus. It will get up high enough to be a problem with power lines. Is very wide in the middle, narrow at the base, and narrow at the top. It's not a real good form for street trees where we typically use them. So some of the factors that affect species selection, we have to look at the size of the physical planting space, the mature size of the tree, which is what I was referring to between the American hornbeam and the European hornbeam. The mature size there plays a big difference. Overhead and underground utilities, desired appearance. If we're looking for just a flowering tree, if we're looking for more shade in an area, if you want a vertical accent or a windbreak, there's a lot of factors that go into that. A big issue that we run into is nursery availability. Nurseries grow what they can sell. It's just a business decision. The more that the customers say they want native trees, the more the nurseries are likely to grow them. But if the market is not there, they will not grow them. And they have to plan out several years in ahead. They have to plan for the future, what's going to be available, what can I grow, how fast I can get it to market, what's going to be bought. So unfortunately, popular, more often than not, takes precedence over native. It just, again, they grow what they can sell. The mature size within a species, this is another instance where variety and cultivars can take precedence over the species because there is a variation. So crepe myrtles are a good example. A lot of people don't understand or don't realize, just not aware. If you're looking for a crepe myrtle, you buy one that fits the space that you have. There are cultivars of crepe myrtle that mature anywhere from 1 foot tall to 35 feet plus. So if you have a small space that's only 5 by 5, and you plant one of the larger cultivars, say a fantasy crepe myrtle, will get 40 feet tall. If you plant that in a small space, you're going to have to butcher it to make it fit. You'll be better off just find one that matures at 10 feet tall. You won't ever have to touch it. Yellow poplar, which is one of the cultivars that we had on the planting list this time, the mature size of the species of yellow poplar is 120 feet plus. If you go out to western North Carolina, you get out in the mountains, anywhere in the southeast where yellow poplar is native, there are some massive specimens, well over 100 feet tall, big enough it would take 3 or 4 of me to even reach around them. They're huge trees. Some of the cultivars of yellow poplar only mature at 35, 55 feet. Much smaller, it's still the same tree, same species, but the cultivars are much smaller, much more suited to where we're planting these trees. With that, I'll open the floor up to any questions on either end of that presentation.
Celeste?
I just want to thank you for this presentation, very helpful. It gave me a greater understanding of, why you would choose certain non-natives, over natives. And I'm fascinated by the whole idea of availability in nurseries. And I think that it's changing. I think that the consumer is changing very slowly. And I think here in Wilmington, we have both, we have the Alliance, we have the Cape Fear Garden Club, and the Native Plant Society, our Arboretum, are all really doing a lot to educate people about native varieties. And my understanding is that there's more and more native varieties and cultivars that are being developed to address the concerns that you've brought up here for and why you might choose to use non-native. So I'm just really glad that word is getting out there, and hopefully the supply will catch up.
Yes, ma'am, and we are seeing some changes in the nursery industry, and it is slow, just for the reason that I mentioned. But the more, like I said, the more demand there is on the consumer side, the more you're gonna see those in the nurseries. And there are a few nurseries scattered around, none really local that I'm aware of, maybe one or two. But there are nurseries that do nothing but native trees for their areas. So it is a possibility. They are out there. They're not always the easiest to get, but that is changing slowly.
And I just want to put this out there because I did go to Doug Tallamy's talk last fall, and that it's just really important, not just for the survival of the trees and the tree canopy, but also for the survival of all the species that depend on the native plants.
Hey, Aaron, I had a question, and this has nothing to do with the plantings, and I know we have members of the tree commission back here, and I know that when we have public hearings, and we have conditional district rezonings, I know that we do, I know our staff does a yeoman's job in trying to preserve or try to get the developer to preserve as many of the trees as possible. One of the things that's always, I've heard from a lot of citizens over time, and I'm sure you have too, Duke Energy and the cut, the V cuts that they make in our live oak canopy. I've seen it on South Live Oak Parkway. I've seen it on Independence Boulevard. I've seen it all over this community. And it seems like they don't maybe get the vitriol that others get. And maybe the tree commission could sit down with those folks, and maybe the Alliance for Tree, or maybe they already have, about really having a serious discussion, because it seems like there's other parts of the state that I have seen where they take a much more surgical look as to how they cut, as opposed to what we run into down here, which is, this is the way we're going to do it, and we're going to cut it, and we're going to slice it. I want to know what, as a tree arborist for our community, what you think about the cuts, and what does it do to the tree? I don't want you to hold back. Just tell me, please.
Let me start that with saying the acceptable pruning practices as far as the style of pruning for utility pruning for clearance from power lines is very different than residential, like just pruning trees in a residential yard. There is a set of standards for both. There's residential commercial tree pruning standards. There's utility tree pruning standards. Utility pruning standards, the V-cut that you're referring to is a standard. The L-shaped cut, or just complete ground-to-sky sidewall, what we call sidewall of the tree, is a standard. Now, how they make a cut in a tree, the standard of how you prune a limb, how you remove a limb from a tree to make a proper cut is the same across the board. But the final appearance, there is a huge difference in the standards. The bigger issue is municipalities and private individuals planting trees underneath power lines that get big enough to interfere with the power lines. With very, very, very few exceptions, the power lines were there first. To my personal knowledge, I only know of one instance where a power line was installed over an existing tree. And that was a matter of necessity. They had no other choice. But the bigger issue is a long-term issue of planting trees in the wrong place. Wrong tree in the wrong place. We plant a large maturing tree under a power line, it's going to get up, and then the community comes back and says, okay, well, they're pruning the tree, they're butchering the tree. We should not have planted the tree there to begin with. If the tree was a natural, just a sprout that just happened because a squirrel planted an acorn, we should have taken it out before it got up big enough to interfere with the power lines. There's a whole host of other issues, tree and power line interference. You should bury the power line. Some people say there's cost and, positives and negatives with even burying power lines, especially in a coastal area like ours that's very prone to flooding. So there's a lot of nuances. I don't know that there's not really a perfect solution. We just have to do the best that we can to have these utilities and the trees coexist as best they can. On our part, our internal planting practices and what we've put into code, we don't allow large maturing trees to be planted under power lines because we're trying to head off that in future generations. We're trying to stop that problem before it becomes a problem. But as far as, kind of to go back to your question, as far as the standards for residential pruning, utility pruning, they're completely different when it comes down to actually making a cut so that it is a proper cut on the tree. Utility standards still require the same proper cuts. So it may look bad, but it is proper according to industry standards.
Does it hurt the tree?
If it's done properly, no.
Okay.
It doesn't look great, but unfortunately, one thing we get into as well, utility companies are under state and federal guidelines. So even if they want to differ from that, a lot of times they can't.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anything else?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
now that we're done with presentations, I had two points that I wanted to bring up. Today in our audit committee meeting, there's an item on our agenda that I asked. I've been working with staff for a couple of weeks, couple of months on this to finally get it to a place where I could bring it up in front of some other city council members. So I wanted to go ahead and make everybody aware that we're going to be hearing this in audit committee and it may come to full council. I've been curious about whether or not any of our city investments have been tied to the fossil fuel industry. And so we're going to be taking a look at that today and about potential options to any financial policy amendments to prevent that from happening in the future if it is happening. So I'm happy to speak with anybody about that before that comes to full council at a subsequent meeting. That's the first thing I wanted to bring up. And then the second question I had is, we're now in June, which is LGBTQ Pride Month, and I was curious, Madam Clerk, has anybody from that community, from our community, submitted a request for proclamation? Because tomorrow would be the first meeting in June, and I did not see it on the schedule.
No one has submitted to me, but let me check with Dawn, because sometimes it goes directly to her, and I always refer it, but I'll follow up with Dawn.
Okay, thank you.
Because we've done it in the past.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anybody else? Okay,
That concludes staff presentation.
okay.
Mr. Mayor, just real briefly, before your first vote on the budget tomorrow night, I want to remind all members of council that under state law, if you are a local public official who is voting on a budget or any type of contract that involves a nonprofit with which you are associated voluntarily, you have to disclose that before the vote on the budget. And so usually how we handle that is that prior to the vote on the budget, I'll just ask you, Mr. Mayor, to go down the line and ask each council member if there are any voluntary boards that they are on. So that means any board that you're a part of that you are on of your own volition and not as a result of being appointed through council as part of a particular board. And so if you all can just be thinking about that, and make out a list of any nonprofit boards that you are a part of, and then when we vote on the budget, we'll ask you to just list those prior to the vote.
Okay, very good.
And I'll send you a copy out today of the state statute about that in case anybody has any questions.
Okay, very good. Anybody else? Okay, with that, we stand adjourned.